Hello, Cliff Stanwyck, Stanwyck Real Estate, and today's video is about how to get your offer accepted, tips for buying your home. Thank you for joining me today, and I'm here to go over every buyer's worst nightmare. You found your dream home and there's 100 people looking at it, and more often than not, there's going to be many buyers trying to submit offers and win the home. And how do you win the home? And I think a lot of buyers in this year's 2023 California real estate market are finding out that market conditions are driving offers that are more often than not waiving all the contingencies, non-refundable deposits, escalation clauses, all kinds of crazy stuff. So how do you win the home that you want, right? That's really the question du jour. And a lot of times that people, buyers in particular and sellers, lose sight that this is a contract. We are writing a California residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions, a contract to purchase a home from a seller. And there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a reason why just that package is 26 pages in California, and it's because it was written by lawyers to essentially make everything a checkbox exercise. And the reality is that real estate agents are not lawyers, and we're not tax professionals. And the current market conditions, again, are requiring people to waive all their contingencies or construct an offer such that it appears that they're all being waived. And there's a lot of gamesmanship going down. And the reality is the seller just wants to sell to the best buyer. They really do. But how a buyer can promote themselves as the best buyer takes place in a lot of areas, right? The first area is make sure you're using an agent that is local to the area. You may think I'm crazy, your best friend, 200 miles away can probably buy you a house in where you want to buy. But the reality is that he doesn't have the relationship with these agents. And these agents are, believe it or not, they have to make a call. Who do you think they're going to pick, right? They're going to pick the agent they've done transactions with because they know that, hey, this person's going to get this thing closed, right? So the agent reputation can matter, right? It can matter. So that's important, right? The other thing that matters is that in this market that you are really knowledgeable about the pricing and you know what is happening in regards to when there's an overbid situation, how much are people bidding over, right? Because the reality of it is you can probably bid, 20, 30% over and you'll probably win the house. But did it have an appraisal contingency? There's where it starts getting dicey, right? So you need to be an expert. You need to be comfortable buying that house in an overbid situation. You need to know the inventory. You need to know, why you want that house, right? You need to be committed, right? I guess that's long story short. What I'm trying to say here is you need to be committed, right? And, there needs to be some back and forth with some, you're probably going to go to an open house or you're probably going to tour it. So when you do go tour that house, you really need to look it over. You need to, because it may be the only time you really get to inspect it. You really need to take a hard look. Does the paint look good? Is the house clean? Is there any discoloration or marks or anything? Are the windows not fogged up, for example? Do the doors close easily? Do doors open? Cabinet doors. Does the toilet look like it's fixed to the floor, right? You go out and look at the eaves, look for water stains, look for staining, look for things. This may be the only chance you have to look over this property. And again, you may be in a situation where that's the only inspection you're going to be able to make, where you are not on the hook because you might have to waive all your inspections. Okay. So again, that's kind of the three-step rule, right? You need to understand the market. Hopefully you got somebody that's going to promote you as the best buyer representing you. And hopefully you are going to see that property and look over that property and figure out if it's go time, right? And the go time is painful, right? And I've made other movies here. The reality is no one who bought Facebook 10 years ago is unhappy with the price of Facebook today. The same thing's true about real estate. Anyone who bought a house 10 years ago, even if they overpaid for that house, is pretty darn happy they have that house, right? So this isn't a flip. This is your home. This is your investment. There's never a great time to buy or sell. It's the lies of real estate. You want to buy a home, you're going to pay whatever it takes. And in general, that asset has always appreciated, okay? It has, and I've made videos on it, and I'm not giving investment advice, but I'm just telling you that most people are very happy looking back at a house that they've owned 4 years now, 10 years, 20 years. Everyone's happy with the house increasing in value. So don't get caught up in the point of time, but you have to be reasonable about or you have to be committed and comfortable about what you're going to offer for these homes, okay? So again, I am just going to fly out my disclaimer here. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only, okay? I'm not giving legal advice, although I'm telling you how to fill out a contract. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I will be more than happy to point you towards a real estate attorney, and you can pay for a consultation with them. And what I am doing is I am filling out a form here for you, and I am just giving you some tips and tactics for why you would do this and how you would do that. So let's hop in and let's look at the contract, okay? So this is the residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions. This is part of the 26-page bundle. Yes, 26 pages, right? And this is where you're making an offer from a buyer, first buyer, second buyer, and the terms of the purchase are specified below and on the following pages. And you are now the parties, right? And at the end of the day, this is the confirmation of your being represented here, okay? And now we are just basically getting into this contract, right? So here's the first things, potentially competing buyers and sellers. The parties each acknowledge receipt of a possible representative, more than one buyer, seller, disclosure, and consent. So again, in this market, you are up against not only multiple buyers, but the buyer may be represented by the listing agent or may be represented by a co-agent in that person's brokerage. That is technically also a definition of dual agency. And again, there is a confidentiality form, but that would need to be signed before you send over your offer. And to be frank, you may not have the time to make that happen, and it may not even matter when it's all said and done. But I'm not minimizing making your offer confidential, but it's not a winning strategy in my opinion. So let's hop back into the contract. Okay, so the first thing in this contract is going to be the purchase price. And again, you need to know what that's going to be, and you should be willing to go, say the house was $750,000, you should be willing to probably add $25K to it to win, right? So this should probably be like $775,000. Okay, and if it's all cash, you would put that there. Now, the close of escrow, this is really important, right? I'm going to keep it simple, stupid. I'm not going to assume we're going to play any deal, but your agent should find out when that close of escrow is going to be. And If it's 21 days and you're using a loan, you better hope that you can get that loan closed in 21 days. That includes an appraisal, and that includes you getting all your loan docs in and anything else. So let's just sit there and say that this is 21 days, okay? Now let's talk about the expiration of offer, right? My opinion of the expiration of offer is do not play games with this. Multiple offer situation with multiple buyers, you need to figure out when you're going to have that offer submitted. You need to find out if there's an offer deadline, whether these offers are going to be received and reviewed as seen. That means if they're going to be reviewed as received, that means you need to get them in, but you can't play games with the expiration saying, oh, I just wrote this offer and now I want an answer in 6 hours. Chances are that's not going to happen. You can tighten it up with 1 day, but in general, you're just going to have to hope that they like you, and there's a lot to be said about still being the first offer in the offer as received. The seller's going to bond to that first offer. The psychology is they have as many concerns about selling the house as you do buying a house, and they're going to look at that offer more than they're going to look at any subsequent offer. So the first offer in on if the details are that is not a bad thing, right? So, but do not play with the expiration of the offer. So we are basically not going to fill anything in. So it's going to be 3 calendar days after all buyers' signatures, okay? Initial deposit, okay? Initial deposit needs to be 3%, right? So that really needs to be essentially $24,000, okay? There's a calculator here, but let's just call it $24,000, right? Actually, it should be $23,000. I recommend a maximum deposit, okay? And on 775, it should be 23,000 and a little bit of change, okay? Actually, 23,225, I believe, is the actual amount. So 3% deposit, maximum deposit. You want to win this house, you need to have a maximum deposit, right? And then basically, you should sit there and say within 3 days, either by wire transfer or by check, okay? All right. All right, increased deposit. Well, you're already at the maximum here. You don't need to have an increased deposit, right? And then again, we come upon removal of contingencies or whatever. That's usually the trick. So let's sit there and say that, let's talk about E1, which is the loan, right? So the loan basically, you're going to have about 20% down, on this loan. And, so that means essentially that the loan is going to be for about $620,000, okay? And you probably need to have, it's going to be fixed rate, and you should put a number in here like a crazy number, because it's not really going to matter what you're putting in here, because you're probably waiving the contingencies here, right? So essentially the default is conventional or check. So let's talk about a couple things here. Well, we'll wait till we get down here. So we're going through, what we're doing. Hopefully, if you can afford to be more than 20% down, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, essentially 20% down is what we're seeing with these conventional loans. And again, that's pretty typical. That means that, that's a pretty straight up loan. And again, conventional is winning. FHA and VA is going to be problematic, and we'll talk about that. Seller financing, I think, in a multiple offer situation, unless you've got that information by from the agent that they want to do seller financing, then that's the reality here, right? So additional finance amount. Again, that may be a gift letter here, or it may be something in here, or another family loan or something, but it could be another loan. Like a lot of people are doing 80-10-10s, right? Either way, right, this is where that would go. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, you got one loan, and we're not talking about cash, right? The cash offer is pretty simple. So here's another section in here. So essentially, you're going to have to bring you've got to show at least $150,000, in cash here, right? So let's keep rolling down here. Seller credit, if any, to buyer. Okay, now we're not seeing this right now, but this is a technique that you could do. You could give a seller credit to buyer here. You could have a rebate of your commission. I'm not necessarily thinking that you should do that. You get your agent to kick in. This may be a point where if you needed some, more money for loan costs, this is where you would ask for it. But let's again assume that we're not doing that. Okay, so this is another thing here where G3 probably would not have you check that as well. So what's happening now is that some of the buyer brokers, when the commission's been lowered, they're asking the seller to agree to pay the obligation of the buyer to compensate the buyer broker. All right. And so there's an agreement that says, hey, this agent's going to get paid 3%. The listing commission is 2%. So then you see a situation where you need to ask for more money. Well, if you ask for more money, that means two things. One, the sales price needs to increase. And B, that you need to have, most likely with a loan, a higher appraisal, right? So I don't really like that idea. I think that you may want to rebate your or work out with your agent to pay their commission outside of the purchase, and then give that seller that commission rebate. What does that do? Well, first of all, it puts more money in their pocket without you worrying about it, right? So the sales price doesn't agree, but you're just saying, hey, you're going to get $10,000. Okay, more money, right? Makes your offer better. So that's a trick you could play, later in this agreement, but the seller credit, if any, to buyer, don't fill that in. The seller to pay any of the buyer's agent's commission, don't do that, right? So, but let's talk about the part that we really need to talk about, which is getting into here the essentially the verification of all cash. Okay, you're not cash, but H26A, really important. Verification of down payment and closing costs. You want to win this house, you need to attach to the offer that that the down costs have been verified, and your lender can send that letter, or you can send a screenshot of your accounts and send that over. But hopefully your loan letter will have that as well. Okay, so let's get to the next part here, which is really key. Verification of loan application. All right, two things need to happen with the verification of loan application. Actually, there's three things that need to happen. First of all, in this market, if you're only pre-approved for the list price and now you're overbidding, you've just lost the house. Okay, they're not going to assume that you have more ability to buy a home. So you should be having a letter that is significantly above your overbid. If you're $25,000 over on your overbid, you should have a letter that's $50,000. You should be approved for a loan that's $50,000 larger. And you should also be able to show a proof of funds that you can cover a $50,000 higher offer, right? So this is where offers are lost, okay? You can't afford more house, you've overbid the property, you don't put your proof of funds in there, and you don't have a letter that says not only you don't have a letter that says you could buy more house, right? You've lost the house. It's over right then and there. You can pack it up, you're done. Now, let's talk about the close of escrow and the loan approval, okay? The loan approval, the only one that matters, and it's a game changer, and it separates you from everyone, is a fully underwritten pre-approval, okay? Fully underwritten pre-approval. What does that mean? It basically means that all that lender needs is a purchase agreement and a preliminary title, and it needs to have a lender's title policy and an appraisal if one's required, and they can close the loan. So if they can get an appraisal and they can close the loan, right? That's basically what it means. The appraisal, and essentially the contract. That's all they need. The buyer doesn't need to submit checking account or proof of funds or anything. They're good to go. That's the golden ticket for you competing with cash, is to be fully underwritten pre-approval, okay? So let's get back into the contract. Now, we're looking at a couple things. Final verification of condition 5 days within the close of escrow. Now we're getting into the contingencies, all right? Now, first of all, you're fully approved for the loan, okay? So you're going to check this box, no loan contingency, all right? The next thing you're going to talk about is the appraisal contingency. Now, this is the nightmare of the contract for you to win the house, right? We are seeing buyers waive their appraisal, which means that if the house doesn't appraise, they have to bring cash. And if they don't buy the house, they lose their deposit, okay? So I am not about waiving the appraisal contingency, but understand, if you do waive that appraisal contingency, you will be putting your deposit most likely at risk with the rest of the waivers on this contract, okay? Now, the approach, I think, that again gets back to your agent is to make sure that your overbid is an overbid that you're willing to do, okay? So let's talk about that, right? So in the contract, I said that the original price of the house was $750,000, and we overbid $25,000. So what we're doing here is we're going to say that the house minimally needs to appraise for $750,000, okay? Now, appraisal. This is another opportunity for you to win, okay? What you're going to put in here is 5 days, okay? Now, let's talk about this, what we're doing here. So a typical appraisal is done in 17 days, okay? And that's, the appraiser comes out. It usually takes a week to get them scheduled. They take 3 or 4 days to do the report. It goes to underwriting, and then it essentially gets, accepted, and then the appraisal with the loan contingency or the loan is finally underwritten, or the underwriters approve it, and then you get loan docs. Okay, so here's the deal. You're going to have to pay up to $2,000 to get an appraisal done in a day. And what is that going to do? First of all, it's going to assure the seller that you're not screwing around, you're not trying to tie up his property, that you're going to get an appraisal done in a day. And that is still going to take some time, depending whether it's a weekend or not, to get the report out and get the report back to you, because the lender is still going to see the appraisal, and then they're going to release it to you. So even if you pay for a same day or a 2-day or a 3-day appraisal, it's probably going to take 5 business days to do that, okay? But what you're basically telling this guy or the seller is that you're like cash, because you've shown them that you have the ability to overpay, that you've given them the proof of funds, that you're fully documented, and you're not messing around. You're going to get an appraisal done for 5 days, and it's going to cost you $2,000, right? $2,000 to have this happen. Okay, so let's hop back into the contract, right? So you haven't waived your appraisal, right? So that isn't waived. So now what's happening? Okay, here's what's happening now. Is people are basically waiving contingencies. All right. Now, it's kind of problematic to do that, right? I would probably tell you that you're taking a risk waiving these contingencies, right? And there's a couple outs in this contract, and I'm just gonna share this with you, right? Waiving your buyer's investigation is a problem, okay? But it's a bigger problem for the seller if he hasn't given you the statutory disclosures, okay, for the home. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the transfer disclosure statement, all right? And the transfer disclosure statement is pretty linchpin here, okay? It's fundamental to the contract, okay? And it's in the contract. It's the one thing that they really need to deliver to you, all right? So I want to finish this up, and then we'll talk about some of this stuff again, right? So you're going to waive your buyer's investigations, right? So essentially, with the contingency removal form, right? You're going to waive all these things. So that's one of the things that you're going to have to do, and we'll go over that form when we get a chance. The review of the seller's documents. Well, if you waive your investigations, guess what? You may have an out. Again, if they haven't given you the TDS, you have 5 days. But you've waived these contingencies. It says right here, removal or waiver of at the time of offer is against agent's advice. See paragraph 8H. All right, I'm going to read this to you. Buyer shall have no obligation to remove a contractual contingency unless seller has provided all required documents, reports, disclosures, and information pertaining to that contingency. If buyer does remove a contingency without first receiving all required information from seller, buyer is relinquishing any contractual rights that apply to that contingency. If buyer removes or waives any contingencies without an adequate understanding of the property condition or buyer's ability to purchase, buyer is acting against the advice of agent. So let's talk about that, right? So again, you're basically waiving all your inspections, all right? And we're seeing that now, okay? And that's not a good thing, okay? Because getting back to the contract, right? It really doesn't matter what the seller disclosures are anymore. You may not have done your homework and found out that you can't get fire insurance at a reasonable cost. Well, guess what? You put your deposit at play. Okay. There may be some issues with the preliminary title report. You don't have the minor's rights, for example. Well, you waived all that, right? So again, there's a bunch of stuff going on with that waiving of all the contingencies or the waiving of the buyer's investigations or whatever. And again, I think it's really important to find out what the mindset of the seller and the seller's agent is. Will they give you any time? Will they at least let you receive the documents, right? Maybe coming back here that you're going to go look at the contingency release, right? And I'm going to look up the contingency release, right? You may want to essentially do the contingency release, and I'm going to throw this up on the screen, right? You may want to do some other things where you're basically going to say here, okay, buyer removal of contingencies, right? Essentially, you may remove the loan investigation, only the part of the investigation related to inspections concerning the physical attributes of the property. Maybe you're just not going to do anything physical, right? But you're going to keep the review of the seller documents, okay? Or the review of the seller documents for this, or the preliminary title report, or the common interest subdivision, or the review of liened items. So say again, right, just looking at some of this stuff here, right, that you're going to still keep your options to review the leased or liened items. You're going to keep your thing of the you still have the contingency of your sale of the buyer's property, although I'll just share with you, you're not going to get the house if you have a house to sell, and there's a whole bunch of offers that don't have that contingency. So forget selling your house in this market, right? So, but these are some of the other contingencies that you may want to have, right? So this again is, a very important area of the contract to truly understand, okay? You may just say, hey, I'm not going to do a well on a septic and I'm not worried about that, but I want to see the seller's disclosures, right? Again, these are some of the nuances of this contract that are really, causing some problems with people. And I'll tell you where the other problem is, and I think it's something that, again, a conversation with your agent, with the listing agent, will go a long way to solving some of these potential, problems when it comes to disclosure issues with your house, right? So the thing I want to share again with you, right, is be very careful about releasing any contingency. You can probably do the loan, because if you're fully documented underwriting, you got, that means you're basically as good as cash as far as I'm concerned, right? You're fully documented and underwritten, and now the buyer is solid. The seller's agent is going to be able to call up the lender and get all this information about the qualifications and the ability of this buyer to perform, right? So that's all good, right? So again, I'm just sharing with you that you really need to be careful about these contingency forms, about going to this part of the contract here and put this contingency release, right? you probably want to have review of the seller's document. And what you should put in here is you should put, like, 1 day, right? Preliminary title report, 1 day, right? You just want 1 day, right? Common interest subdivision, interest disclosure. If you're in a thing, you want 1 day, review of leased items, you want 1 day, right? These are all things that you may have. Now here you may want to say, you know what, I don't need to investigate the property, right? I'm good, because I'm going to review the seller's disclosures, right? Informational access to the property. You may want 17 days just so to go measure, right? But again, right, these are some of the things you have to think about. And I think anytime you can shorten this up, and a lot of this has to sit with a conversation with the listing agent to find out, hey, are they going to allow us to at least look at the seller documents? Okay. So anyway, that's part of the thing that you can do. And then, of course, you're going to have to release the contingencies for the review of the seller document, the review of the preliminary title report, or the common interest subdivision, or the sale or leased items, right? So again, right, let's talk about the next section. Time of possession. All right, now in the time of possession, usually, in my humble opinion, that it's best done on the day that it records, but depending on, my usual default is 6 p.m. the end of the day. If it's recorded, it's usually recorded by 4 p.m., at least in Placer County. But again, you may want to give them the luxury of a day or two to move out, right? So again, originally we said 21 days to close it. Say you find out that they really would like a 30-day close, but you're willing to close in 21 days. And there's nothing in this contract that we've done that would be any different. But the reality of it is you can give them a few extra days. And where do you do that? You would do this thing if it's 29 or fewer days. Let's say we're going to give them the month that they want, but we're closing it. We're going to give them 9 days. And then we would put that there. And that would essentially take care of that, right? So now they've got 9 days of free rent. That is a smart thing to do if you know that. Again, this is some of the stuff that will come up when you talk to them. Now, let's talk about the seller delivery of documents, right? That's on them to get these documents to you fast, right? You're going to give them, you're going to get back to them within 5 days after delivery, whichever is later, right? You're essentially going to do this piece, right? You're saying you need 1 day. If you have it, you just want a day to look at them. But if you don't, you got 5 days. None of this stuff here is really, this is a seller delivery document, that's on them. Time to pay for ordering HOA documents, that's on them. Install smoke alarm, CO2, that's usually on the seller. It's in the contract, that's on them. Evidence of representative capacity, that's on them. Okay. Let's talk about items included and excluded. All right. In general, right, do not assume anything's included without talking to the listing agent. All right. And don't negotiate these items at this point. You're better off not blowing the deal up over a washer and dryer or a refrigerator or a video doorbell if the listing agent doesn't know and you really want them, right? 7 offers. If you're the only one asking for the refrigerator, the washer and dryer, the video doorbells, and all the security equipment, you're probably not going to win the house, right? So that's pretty much what I recommend that you do here. And what happens is if you click any of these items, they just may counter it out. Trust me, if they've got 7 offers, they're not going to take the time to write all the stuff out of yours unless your offer is just so much higher than anyone else's, okay? So let's talk about closing costs, all right? Here's your opportunity here to basically take on all the closing costs that a seller would typically pay. This is your opportunity again to spend $3,000, $4,000 to win the house versus having the agent figure out, because they probably don't know what the net sheet is for this deal, and that's another topic we're going to talk about. So my recommendation when it comes to the allocation of costs is for the buyer to pay everything. So the buyer should buy the NHD. The seller is usually requires to do that. Seller for here, seller for here. Escrow fee, buyer. Owner's title policy, buyer. County transfer tax, buyer. City transfer tax, if applicable, buyer. HOA transfer fee, buyer. Okay? If you're going to buy a home warranty, buyer. Okay? Any escrow. Seller's choice, which is really, to be frank, is really the agent. Make the agent happy, right? Everybody wants a free coffee cup. So let them win, right? So that's the other thing here, right? Now, a lot of these forms, this would be filled out from your agent. That should be fine. If you were buying some sort of country property and it would have propane well and septic, again, if you're waiving those inspections, it doesn't matter, but there is a part in there with propane, blah, 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 right? The other thing that comes up here, which I think is pretty important, is the wildfire disaster addendum or advisory and the statewide buyer and seller. Okay. And that's pretty much the offer. Okay. We've completed the offer. So let's just kind of summarize it from beginning to end here. So before you look at your dream home in a market where you know there's going to be multiple offers, you need to make sure that you have a approval that is $50,000 to $100,000 more than the price of the home that you're looking at. If you can't get there, they're not going to consider your offer because they're going to figure you're maxed out, and anything they push back on you is going to be problematic, right? So a fully documented and underwritten approval for your loan, proof of funds, that again, that shows that you have an ability to overbid. So if you have $150,000 in closing costs to do this home at the list price, and you should show at least $200,000 to do your $50,000 overbid. And if you can show more money, like $250,000 or $300,000 in cash, I know we're talking a lot of money, and you may be priced out. All I'm trying to share with you is that's the type of market it is right now, and that's the type of stuff you need to be doing. You need to waive as many contingencies as you can, and that means home inspections, septic inspections, well inspections, sewer inspections, roof inspections. Chances are your pest inspections, I think I said it, chances are you're not going to get to do the inspections. Now, you should most likely keep your inspections for the seller review of the document, and if there's any leased items, and a preliminary title report. That's really important to make sure that you know there's no issues with the title. I think that's a reasonable request. So, wanted to sum it up. I I think you'll understand that to make an offer